Okay, we're recording.
Calling the October 25th meeting, 4:30 p.m. to order. Do I have a motion to approve? Is that how it goes?
So moved.
Second.
And shall we start with the pledge? This is when we need Lucy with the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lindsay, I don't have the agenda in front of me. I got to bring it up, but if you can start that, please.
The next item is public comment. I don't see anyone from the public here, but
Oh, I'm on mute. I'm sorry, Doug. I just said that. I don't see anyone online for number 2. Number 3, approval of the agenda. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda
So moved.
by Amanda.
Second.
Second by Jamie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Number 4, approval of minutes from the September 27th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Amanda, second.
I'll second.
Second by Jamie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, number 5, learner-centered practices, examples, and discussion. I think this is a breakout from last meeting, a little more in depth than we had gotten last meeting. So if you guys want to take that, I don't know who's taking that, Stephanie, Liza, or Tara, or Doug.
well, I'll start and just say we appreciate the opportunity to share more because I think we've shared some of the broader strokes in this area, but I think what you guys are really interested in is some of the more specifics of what may be happening. And I think we decided Tara is the best one to share. And at some point, you guys might even want to invite back either to this setting or to full board meeting some of the staff members, individual staff members who are doing some of this work, but I don't want to steal any of Tara's thunder. So Tara, you go ahead.
Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I am our learner-centered coach, and I just counted before I hopped on. This is my 18th year in district, which I didn't realize how long it had been, but it's 18 years. So it's neat to be in this new position, and it's a lot of fun to get to work with colleagues in a different capacity. Prior to this, I was a math instructional coach. So I have what I feel like is a really good relationship with a lot of my colleagues, but I'm getting to work with strong in the high school as well. So I'll bring to you some examples today, but to get started, I just wanted to share with you that sort of a self-assessment in 3 different levels, like, beginner or a novice level, and then 2 more levels after that were developed where teachers could kind of sort of self-reflect and figure out where they wanted to start and kind of think about their own practices as it stands now. And it began a conversation between a colleague and myself to figure out where they would like to go and what they would like to do. So we started with that last year, and we got a lot of discussion happening, which was great. There was teachers I got to work with and do various different levels of support where it may have just been a conversation and teachers felt like they could go off and run with things, where there was also some ideas of projects that we sort of co-facilitated in their classroom. So there was different levels of support in that sense. I have a few secondary examples and a few elementary examples to share with you. One of which is in the high school math department. There's a teacher who is trying very carefully to create a self-paced classroom with differentiated activities and lessons for her students. She's very clear in providing the lesson objectives for the entire unit. So students can sort of self-reflect about their prior knowledge and the new knowledge that they need to gain. Students are in this whole process really being encouraged to advocate for themselves. And when that happens, the classroom teacher is really trying to celebrate that. She is providing really great opportunities for learners to build relationships with one another. There's only so many adults in the room, but there are many more students in the room. So to depend on one another and lean on one another for help and support as needed, especially when she gets learners that are not necessarily native English speakers. Um, and she's also in the midst of sort of creating a classroom check-in where there's a, and it's, I would say daily, but she doesn't meet classroom, or the classes up at the high school don't meet daily, but every class there'll be a check-in of what's the goal you're working on today? How are you feeling in general? So an SEL check, and an opportunity to advocate for some help right on that form before class ever begins. So we're going to pilot that and see how that goes. But she's self-reporting a lot of success, and students feeling very successful with this new system and being able to move themselves along at their own pace. Some are moving at different speeds, but that's okay. There's plenty of support in that room with both the students and the adults that work with her, to provide that extra time some students need in that classroom. There's also a science classroom at the high school that has built a Google site that provides a myriad of different resources that students can choose from to master the content and the lesson objectives that are needed for the course. Um, she's also included a variety of assessments in this classroom, and when the student is ready to show they're ready for the assessment, they're able to take it. I'm trying to read through my notes quickly, sorry. I lost my spot. She's also giving an opportunity for learners, or students, control over their own learning, of how they demonstrate their learning and in what form. Lots of use of rubrics so that students know exactly what is expected of them, but then it is their choice and freedom however they'd like to present their learning. And it's not, I should probably rephrase that. It's not like they've got the world to choose from. They definitely have a choice board of items to choose from. So, but she's trying to pull on their strengths. As someone might like to get up and stand and speak in front of their group. Well, another might want to make a visual presentation to share their information. So it's building on students' strengths and comfort level in that sense. High school's been interesting to work with because this is sometimes really different for students at this point because they haven't experienced this in previous years. So kind of getting them out of their own shell has been an interesting conversation. And the reports coming back is that they're getting used to this and they're liking it, but it's very different from what they've experienced in the past. So that was an interesting obstacle to have to overcome. Let's see, at the middle school for social studies, a revised curriculum was created over the summer that would allow students to move at their pace through the curriculum, displaying their skills. This is, although there's content to learn, the teacher is really trying to hone in on skills of critical thinking and reasoning that the students will need to come away from that class with. There is a strong focus on using similar language that the students are hearing in other academic areas, as in ELA and in science. So they're doing a lot of CER words, claim, evidence, and reasoning. And you might even hear some, I know we've got some parents in the group that have children at school, you might even be hearing that at home, but that's the language that they're trying to keep consistent so that the exposure for the student is at a very high level rather than in just one academic area. In the same class, we're really trying to build a learner community where they see each other as equals and as important as the teacher in the room, so that they can lean again on one another when they're learning new material, new skills. They can work together They're also being given choice in this classroom as well, with a variety of different resources and a choice of learning output. Um, Again, it's a shift and it's a slow and steady shift, but the students are really responding well to it and enjoying it. Down in elementary, it looks a little different only because the choice needs to be a little bit more structured for them. Um, but at Memorial in a special education room last year, we created a really nice project for students to be able to have choice. It was a geography project where they had the opportunity to choose what they wanted to study, what resources they were going to use within certain parameters with the, available to them and safe for them to use, how they were going to present their information, and who they got to work with. And it was a lot of fun to watch them get really excited about what they were interested in. Some of them chose projects or places around the world that were connected to their family and their family's history. So they had a lot of fun with that. And it was what was eye-opening in that whole project was to watch their excitement and engagement with it, and that they honestly could sit with some adult or even a peer and have a depth conversation about what they were learning and where they found that information, and make connections between the areas in which everyone was studying, to find some similarities or vastly different information about, just the geography of the place that they chose around the world. So it was interesting to watch the level of engagement rise incredibly when they got to choose um, where they were studying and how they were going to share their information. And in a special education room, we have varying disabilities, but everyone was able to share um, all of their learning in a very meaningful way for everyone. Um, and then in a much lower level class, in kindergarten, we are building communities of learners. They're often, first year of school, they're learning school, and they always go to the adults in their room. But last year in a kindergarten room, we did a really nice project with a group of children where they got to share what makes them happy, and they got to share likes and dislikes and hobbies, and they started to find connections between peers in their classroom they never thought they had. Um, Big hit was they all love to swim. So they all had their own personal anecdote about swimming or learning to swim, but it really started to connect them as friends in that group, not just children who show up in a classroom with a teacher to learn every day, which was a lot of fun. So we're going to actually build on that this year. Um, we found a connection in the new EL literacy curriculum. Kindergarten right now is becoming toy experts. So they learn how to describe a toy and what their preferences are, and learning that someone's preference is not their preference. But we're going to build on that idea and bring in, um, how do we learn together as a community, because we all have strengths, and to build on those strengths and know who we can reach out to if our tablet's not working. I've got a tech expert in the room that's really into this and knows how to fix a problem. So instead of going to an adult, you can go to a peer, or someone's really good at using the math manipulatives and I'm struggling, so I know I can call on my buddy over here, so that it becomes they're learning from one another and not just the adults in the room. So we're going to build off the idea of community helpers from their social studies curriculum, but make them classroom community helpers. But we're really excited that we were able to find that connection to the EL literacy curriculum. So something they're already doing, we're just going to build off from. And so far, the students are extremely excited to do it. So we'll see how that goes. But that's sort of just a snapshot of things that are going on around the district. And those are the classrooms that at the moment I have a very strong tie into, as in I am helping facilitate those items. There's lots more that's going on where someone will reach out to me and ask for um, uh, resources on emotional regulation. Like, how do we work with our youngest learners and figure out how they can think about their emotions, regulate their emotions, so that they can come back to a lot of the elementary school classrooms. Use the green zone, the red zone, and the yellow zone. So come back to that green zone so that you are ready to learn and be a community member. So it could be as simple as I'm sending out a resource list, but the examples I shared with you today was where I had a direct connection to their classroom, doing things in the classroom and supporting the teacher. So anyone, I can I can elaborate on any of this. I know I just threw a whole lot at you, but I wanted to kind of give you a smattering of all the levels and what's going on around town.
Is the doctor in today?
Yeah, Linda is, but she'll be in and out. She might not be able to speak. But Tara, I had a question. That revised curriculum at Strong, that's all 3 grades?
No, that was just one grade level.
What grade is that?
8th.
8th. Okay.
I think the hope is to revise more, but actually revise a curriculum over a summer is a pretty hefty feat.
Yeah, I know. If anyone's up for the challenge, it's Dan Carco, though.
You're absolutely right.
He's a big asset to Strong, and he's been wonderful with the kids. So I definitely think he has that in him. When we're looking at like indicators, even if we're looking at like next gen, or maybe it's more of like Stephanie and Liza, and we'll kind of code back and forth here. But when we're talking about indicators for success on that next generation accountability, do we have any concerns that, we're talking about content that kids love and connecting with those, and how does it work when we've got content that the kids struggle with or that isn't fun or isn't easy? What is the transition there, and how do we tie that into student-centered?
Very valid question. I think through a lot of the conversations I've had with colleagues is that they're noticing, take for instance, kindergarten class, there are certain life skills, social skills that the kids are developing really strongly, that we're almost building a human learner, that I think that if we install or instill some skills and work on them with the students, whether they connect with the material or not, I think they're going to be able to persevere and have that work ethic we hope for them to have. And I think if we stick with that building block, I think we can be successful with any curriculum that they face. I'm a huge proponent of building executive functioning skills with learners from early on. I think as adults, we sort of forget that we were taught along the way, but it was done in such a quiet manner that we don't, I think we've forgotten that some of these things do need to have attention. And when we come back to those items, we definitely do see a different learner. So I think those are our building blocks to build from and to make sure that they're solid, because the curriculum could be anything. But if we don't build a thinker, we don't build a resilient child who can come off the playground and have had a conflict but knows how to kind of come down from that and sit and have those strategies then to attend to what they need to get done in the classroom, we could throw anything at them, and I don't think they'll be ready for it. So I do think we have to build sort of that critical thinker. It's almost like it's not almost, it is our competencies that we've written. If we hold tight to those and we build that type of learner, I truly think we'll have learners that could handle anything in school and out of school.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about executive functioning, and I think that, when you talk about learner-centered and having them be able to make these jumps for themselves and what they want and how they want to learn it, that's where I really struggle, is with the executive functioning. Because me myself, I have one that really struggles with executive functioning, and it's been a battle even from as much as you work on it. So I struggle to think how kids that already have those issues, whether that puts them behind. Is it going to take longer for them to get into the jump of learner-centered if they're already having issues choosing between, even making the smallest decision between a hamburger and a hot dog? Like, how are they going to be able to make that jump in their own learning environment between, I want to learn about this or I want to be that? Is it something you start in kindergarten? It's just executive functioning is just a part of the curriculum. It's just going to be something weaved into everything.
I foresee that happening, because if we hold tight to the competencies that we've written, it's inevitable that we start at kindergarten and build those skills. And not every student is going to master those. And I believe that their personalized education is going to reflect their strengths and their needs. I can't imagine that we would have everyone at the top level. It's just they're humans. But I do think if we pay attention to those, and when I say adults, I don't mean just District 13. I think in general, the education world, I think sometimes forgets that we have to teach children these skills along the way. But I do think we're moving in the right direction with these competencies, and as long as we hold tight to those and we really focus on those, everything else, I don't want to say will fall into place, but will come along. We need to have children who can think and we can self-advocate and persevere, um, all that we have set out for them. And I think if we really teach them hard and fast skills and we practice it and we develop those, we will see a different learner.
And I think that's where a lot of the, sorry, Doug, just before I forget it, I think that's where a lot of what you're talking about to begin with, and all these examples of where you've tried, you're trying it in small settings or in small grade levels, or even, one subject area. And I think that that's what's really important for the board. And I think it's what's important for the community to see, and how this evolves, and so if we could get updates, or if we can showcase these learner-centered, student-centered practices that are happening, the more we can grasp what the future is going to look like, what it's going to look like in 5 years, what it's going to look like in 10 years. And I know I've said it a few different times, but it's hard for anyone to see something on a paper and say, where's my kid going to be? Where's our district going to be in 5 years? So I think that holding to that and really analyzing that and discussing it together and moving forward that way, I think is the best way to really get everyone to understand what's going on and how it's going to work. So great. Thank you.
Yeah, so if I could jump in, a couple things to your last point, Lindsay. I think we're very attuned to that conversation that the board has had with us, and we're working on that piece of it, the more long range action planning, where you can see a little bit more meat on the bones. Now that's a little bit in contrast to where we are right now, because at this point, I think the beauty in what Tara's been able to support is it's been kind of like they're asking her, so like they want her to come and they're inviting her in. So, it's almost like if you look at the EL curriculum, we didn't give teachers a choice. Yes, we invited some of them to be part of the conversation around what program are we going to select, but we didn't say, if you feel like doing the EL program, you can, and if you don't, you can kind of do your own thing. At that level, we've made a district level decision, and eventually we envision doing that with all this learner-centered work. But right now, just like you're saying, it's hard for you to envision. I think it's hard for some of our teachers to envision their practices being very different. Even some of the ones that Tara's working with have been very courageous and vulnerable about, they know they need to be thinking differently, but it's not the way they've been doing things for a long time. And quickly to the executive functioning, I even believe the state, whether we believe that they have the wisdom or not in this area, has recognized that they've gone overboard with hammering in content and test scores. I think that's why the test score requirement has come out of the new evaluation system. And it's also why they've put in a new requirement, for better or worse, for what they're calling play-based learning, which most people would say is the kind of building blocks of executive functioning through play-based learning. Again, I'm dating myself here. I'm 55, but I can remember being in kindergarten and not just doing math and reading all day long, the way that our kids kind of do now for the most part, with a little bit of related arts sprinkling in. There was a lot of unstructured play, and there was a recognition back then that kids need to learn how to learn before you can just jump right into the content. And so I think Connecticut's realized that, and the pendulum is swinging back a little more in the other direction. Again, I wish it weren't a mandate. I wish it were a suggestion, and we're still getting our arms around what that looks like. And I think to the specific question about, can kids handle this if they don't have the executive functioning skills, and is that going to set them up? I think we have to be sensitive to that. But my reaction to that would be, the older they get and the more they're lacking in those skills, the less they're equipped to go out in life and use those skills. And so I almost feel like we need to double down, whether it's a purely learner-centered environment right out of the gate. And we need to help teach those kids how to make choices and things like that. I know you were kind of joking about the hot dog hamburger thing, but that's a real thing. And I think it's a
Oh,
lot.
I know. I lived it in many a fast food line for many years with the two of them. So
Yeah, so I know you guys got to see many of you got to participate in some of the capstone presentations last spring. And, one of the takeaways from the high school with that was great, but we kind of didn't start till senior year. And so I don't want to steal any Liza's thunder for her next presentation, but if there's room on the agenda, we would love to come back in November with Deb and Katie and Liza and maybe even a few others to talk about some of the ways at secondary and then filtering down below in the out years, we'd like to fundamentally change kind of how we're helping kids in that area. Is that enough of a teaser, Liza, or did I steal your thunder? Well, we
yeah,
agree.
I think the capstones
agree
are
with you,
amazing.
Phyllis.
I mean, I know that Bob and I were both there for a capstone, and it was amazing to see. And you truly did see the kids that they wanted to excel, and they went above and beyond. And then you did see some kids that went through the criteria, and they did what was asked of them. But I think it allowed some of these students to really take a passion and move forward with it and go through all these different steps. To see one of them literally had changed it a couple months before and had the same amount of content at the end, because they knew that wasn't what they wanted to do, but they wanted to full and just work hard to get where they were for their final capstone. And it was an amazing presentation. I mean, I look forward to it this year. I think it's going to be great.
Tara, what are the math and science classes that are doing this?
Math is integrated math, and science is the geophysical and zoology.
And that's ninth for geophysical, I think. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
And zoology
Yes.
is an elective.
It could be some others depending on if they choose it as an elective, but in general, it's ninth. Yes.
Tara, thank you for being with us, and I'm thankful for your long service here. I'm ashamed I didn't recognize your unique last name, but I'm happy you're with us.
Thank you. I
You
appreciate it.
mentioned earlier, you mentioned earlier about at the high school level, having the students have an opportunity to present something that they're more interested in. You have the parameters. I'm always curious on the rubrics thing. I'm a little indifferent with them. It's all great to show the student, how they're going to achieve a score. Perhaps it's a little bit of a backup to a parent why a student gets a grade. Do you do different rubrics based on what they choose to do, though? And that can be a pretty long process to create one. And I know sometimes they're long worded, and I sometimes wish they were just pretty short. And I don't know, do you do different rubrics based on what they choose to do?
So I'm feverishly trying to pull up one of them that we created, and I will tell you exactly what. So what I did is I asked the teacher to kind of give me sort of the checklist of items that students needed to have included in their project. So this particular one, they were going to, they had to take a system of an organism and show the evolution of it. So it could be any. So in that sense, there is a parameter. Like you must choose a system. The system you choose is up to you. And so in that they had to have a summary of the system, the evolution of the system, how it changed over time. So while it's sort of open-ended, they all needed to have certain aspects of this. So that is where the rubric is then designed. It's based on the aspects of the presentation, the discussion they have in a small group, or their visual, whatever they choose, or their broadcast. Some of them actually were given the opportunity to record something in some fashion. So but they all have to have those components of information in them. And then as it's delineated out in the different levels, is where do you then gain your points? The teacher and I had some discussion about, even though it's a 4-leveled rubric, and with the greatest amount of points is to be 20 points, is that really how she's going to use it? It was up to her how she was going to actually facilitate that in her class. But we did at least delineate out for the students what was the criteria for getting full credit and what was the expectation for that project. So again, they had choice in all of it. How do you present it, which system you're choosing, but within that, there was some defining factors, and that's where that we call a loose tightness that I think students are comfortable with at this point, because they haven't been in this open-ended sort of system we're hoping for them to have at some point. So we're gradually getting them there, but they're doing a really nice job with the choice that we are providing them, but with that sort of structure in place as well. So that's how we're using those rubrics.
That's great. Also, in the world we're in with the least restrictive environments for some students, do you think that is effective for special needs students to be integrated with other classes? Would that work to give them options as far as what to do? It's not to dumb it down or make the bar lower, but we're all special our own way, and that certainly seems like it would embrace that mentality.
So the project I did with the special education students at Memorial last year, they were doing the same project as their typical peers in their classroom were doing. I was just working with them when they were working directly with their special education teacher. But their projects and their learning looked no different than the peers that were in the classroom with the content area teachers, which was, I felt, was a win-win for everybody, because like you said, we didn't lower the bar. We gave them choices to how they did it. They embraced that choice. They got excited about it. They were engaged. They showed just as much learning as any other student in any other academic area, or teacher, I should say, at that point. And the learning product that they created was top notch. I mean, I think you set the bar where you want them to, and any student, when engaged, will reach it as best as they can.
I can't help but to reflect back in about 1978 in the district at Memorial. We had a wonderful history teacher. It was a European history class, and there were a few difficult students in the class. We weren't so segregated and separated, and that was actually valuable because we just became friends. We just learned that people are different, and again, we're all special in a way. But Mr. Dyer, through the European history, we were studying, there's torture going on in Europe, and they did that sort of stuff to have order. But he did something so wonderful for the students that were more disruptive. Your project will be something hands-on based, and you're going to build a medieval torture device at home, make something, bring it in, and show what it is. And you know what? There was engagement. I was amazed. I saw that even, at 12 years old. Like, wow, he just did something magical there. It's certainly different, but it's sort of in the same style, really.
I agree. I think student engagement is the secret sauce. You get children engaged in some sort of learning activity, and they'll take off and run with it.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else have any questions or comments for Tara before we move on? Nope. Okay.
Well, if you don't, Tara does need to move on. So I hope you guys aren't offended if she exits the Google Meet.
No, thank you for coming, Tara.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
So we will move on to number 6, indicator 6, post-secondary readiness. I know Liza had sent us out a graphic on this one. So if you can pull that up,
Yes.
that might help. And I'll hand it over to Liza.
Great. Thank you so much. Today I have for you indicator 6, which is post-secondary readiness. I selected this for this meeting for a couple different reasons. One is I recently received an email that these results were ready. And number 2 is because of what I want to share with you about the dual credit courses. So in looking at this measure, what the state does is it takes the percentage of students in grades 11 and 12 that achieve a certain mark on the SAT or ACT or AP or IB test, or earning 3 or more college credits through dual credit coursework. So that is the percent, the indicator score is the percent of all 11th and 12th graders that have met the mark on one of those indicators, on one of those either tests or the dual credit. So I want to point out a couple different things. First of all, the AP benchmark, it looks low. I want to point out that that benchmark is of the total learner population. That is how many meet that benchmark, but not all our students take APs in 11th and or 12th grade. And actually, there were last year 149 AP exams taken. And of those, 131 was a 3 or higher, which meets the benchmark for the state. So that's an 88% pass rate. So I just wanted to make sure that you recognize that it was not a very low pass rate for APs. It's actually, that's out of the total population. And then I wanted to also mention in this the dual credit course work, which it was 23.4 in 21-22 and 27.7 in 22-23. And we are looking at that indicator to really improve. And in doing so, we have gotten a grant from the state. This is the Dual Credit Expansion Grant. And this grant is to help us set up possible dual credit options for our students. So what we have indicated in the grant is that we are going to partner with Sal Menza. He's from Goodwin. He's from the Goodwin District and University. And he has come in once already to work with a small group of us to try and develop some pathways. And these pathways are in certain areas such as health sciences, business, and liberal arts. And what this will do is it will allow us to articulate, which means to allow our learners to take courses at our high school that will get college credit. So we are going to expand in that area through this grant. And we've tried to map out one pathway so far just to see what we can accomplish. And we are thinking that learners can get anywhere from 3 all the way up to possibly 18 college credits through a pathway in partnership with Goodwin University. I don't have much more information on that because we are having our next meeting on Tuesday with Sal. And what we're really going to do is develop these opportunities further, see what needs to happen in order for us to perhaps pilot this path, one of these pathways in the next school year. So I wanted to mention that we are really working on that dual credit course percentage. And there's a lot of research that says that if a student takes a college course in high school, they are A, more probable to actually go on to college, and B, more probable to be successful in college. So if we expand that, we are helping them in high school as well as in their future. So that is what I wanted to mention. As Doug already said earlier, we do hope to bring Deb and Katie, if you are able to have them next meeting to expand more on this, especially after we have met with Sal and have a little more planned and a little more to share for you.
Liza, don't we already have UConn courses?
We do have UConn courses. There are a couple different things about this. UConn only has certain courses that are available. And Goodwin offers more. Number 2 is that the requirements for a teacher to be able to articulate the course at our school is higher from UConn than from any other institute of higher education. So at UConn, they have to have a master's degree in the subject that they are teaching. So for example, you can't have a master's in secondary education or in special ed, something like that. You have to have it specifically in that. So if you do not have a master's degree in physics, you can't teach an articulated class in physics. And that makes it very difficult. And so we are trying to find different avenues with a little more possibility and flexibility, because we know our teachers are great and can certainly handle that, but the regulations are prohibiting that in some instances.
But if they get a good one, the credit at UConn wouldn't be acceptable then, right?
Most credits are transferable within the state of Connecticut. Same with UConn. Outside of Connecticut, it's all depends on the institution, but for the most part within the state of Connecticut, those institutions do accept credits. So they can take the UConn course. We're looking to expand that. We already do offer those, but we want to offer even more. And so we're looking at other opportunities in that area.
And if
two things I have on that one.
Sorry, go ahead, Lindsay.
Liza, I'm sorry, Doug. Are there any financial implications to going with Goodwin? Is that partnership different than going through Goodwin? Because I know that they're different structured wise. It's a for-profit.
The course payment is the same, exact same as UConn. We definitely checked on that. So it would be the same course fee that would be from a UConn course. Which is currently $150 per course.
Which, that's $150, you said?
Thousands that you pay when you're enrolled. So.
And then, do we have any of the UConn courses that are not running from past years? Or are we currently running all of them?
It depends on, we do have some that are not running. Some are on an alternate year schedule. And there is one that I believe is not being offered because the teacher who was teaching it had the master's degree in the area and has left the district, and therefore we cannot offer it because we do not have someone with that master's. So that's what I mentioned, that we don't want to not offer these classes. And so we're looking to be able to expand that a little bit with easier.
So the teacher that had left, that we replaced that teacher with, they didn't have that skill set. They didn't have that degree.
Yes, and it's not a master's degree in education. It's a master's degree like in that field. And like I have a master's in music ed. Like that doesn't even count. And it have to be like in. So has to be in the subject area.
Gotcha.
Yeah, if I could jump in, I think, and again, Deb and Katie will expand on this along with Liza next month if you guys are okay with that. But I think what energizes me about this is that a lot of times when you think about AP and even like UConn courses, you think about things we're providing for our highest achievers, and those that may have been on an honors track, like all the way through high school. And no one is suggesting that we diminish those offerings in any way. But I think what Goodwin offers through this partnership and through these pathways, hopefully, are courses that we're not currently offering that might be of more interest to more of our learners. And so we're not saying you have to be straight A's for life, honors classes to take anything that's college equivalent. I think what we're trying to actually say is we want you to find something you're passionate about. And then from the money side of it, I think even as a way to sell it to parents with, the rising cost of tuition, if parents want to support their kids going and getting their undergrad degrees or even their associate degrees after they leave us, I think we need to be offering more and more opportunities for them to take these discounted rate courses and defray the cost of that. That was extremely popular in Virginia, mostly through community colleges. And a lot of times, I hate to say it, it wasn't even the kids that wanted to take these courses. It was their parents that were making them as a way to say, we want you to go to college, but we don't want it to take 4 or 5 years. We want it to take 3 years or 3.5. Again, it still may not be for every child, but we feel like we could do a lot more in this space. And we actually feel like that might also help market Coggin-Chog to some of the families that might be choosing private schools or other options where those options exist and we don't have them. And through this grant, Sal and his team are doing the legwork for us that we would never have the time to do to articulate all of these courses. And again, we're not promising that all this is going to appear in 1 year, but the grant gives us a great start in this direction. And I know Deb and Katie and Liza are very excited, and some of the teachers at the high school that have been starting to work on this.
I do think sometimes some students will take the college level courses that give them credit, not necessarily for the credit. They just want to have something maybe a little more challenging. So that does exist as well. But we don't necessarily need a teacher with the master's for that subject to do that sort of thing.
Is there anyone else that has any questions on this?
Yeah, I have a question. Well, I don't know if it's a question as much as it is a concern to kind of keep in your radar. Goodwin is a private for-profit college, and I understand that it is being funded right now through a grant, whatever partnership. However, I just be very wary of the fact that, and I've had some experience with them in other locales, that they are profit driven. They are revenue driven. So I'm just curious as to what kind of legwork has happened to look into the public community 2-year colleges. They recently revamped their whole system to allow for these pathways. So I'm just curious as to why we are going with a for-profit rather than one that's part of the Connecticut system already.
Are you sure they're for profit, Linda? Because they did have a wing that's in the news a lot. You've heard of Stone Academy. That was their for-profit wing, but they disbanded from that. So I'm not sure.
No, they are,
They're
because
still.
they had a hard time. So there's a different organization that already has an association with Teachers Retirement Board that was managing the schools, because the Teachers Retirement Board and the unions would not allow them to function as a public school system with their magnet schools because they were for profit. And so they started doing what TRB required in order for them to now be allowed to run these magnet schools that they do. However, they are still a private for-profit college.
So you were asking what legwork was done?
Well, and like I said, I think I'm much more concerned about the future. Free is always good. Grant covered, always good. But my concern would be setting up a partnership now and then finding out that the price tag increases astronomically. And we have many schools that are already, we have a network of community colleges and 2-year colleges in the state that would no doubt be cheaper if it was not covered by a grant.
Okay, so the grant is only for startup costs. Actually, it cannot pay for anything past this year. So what Sal is doing with us is helping us to build the pathways. And of course, as he is actually the superintendent of the district, he is not affiliate. He's not part of the university, but he's helping us to set those up. Those can include things from, say, UConn. There is one we're looking for business from Central. They can include other institutions. of course, there are some really interesting things that Goodwin is doing and can offer, especially they're doing some interesting things in the area of cybersecurity and some other tech areas. So there's some things that they could be used for. We are continuing to offer our UConn courses, and we're doing also from Central. We're looking into a business program from Central, and the grant itself is just to set these up and to make sure that all of our teachers have the training and requirements that are needed so that they are able to articulate these courses.
Yeah, again, actually now it's even more concerning that it only covers the startup cost, because I got to tell you, I have experience with other districts trying to use Goodwin as a partner, and it comes with an enormous price. They are part of Goodwin. Sal is the superintendent of the schools, but he functions under Goodwin University. So again, if the quote unquote startup costs is then transferable and you can use that information and structures and systems for something else, but I'm telling you, it will come with a price tag after that startup. So again, it's not a me decision. I just happen to know, I happen to have experience, and I'm telling you, it's going to come with a hefty price tag.
Having taught for 25 years in for-profit post-secondary, I don't necessarily have a bad view of it. We didn't have to deal with all the stodgy, slow bureaucracy where nothing got done. So I'm not entirely against it, but yeah, I would not like to see, the cable TV syndrome where you're charged this amount and then suddenly 6 months later it becomes quadruple. So yeah, something to look into. Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah, I do think it's a good point, Linda, and we'll definitely look into that. And also look at if there are any restrictions put in place by the grant, because my understanding, and Liza, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they're working with quite a number of districts across the state, and there are some parameters kind of put around this. So we need to check, but I'm hoping they have safeguards like that in place, because I don't think the state would underwrite a lot of this if what you're describing is where we're going to be in a few years. But I'm also comforted to hear that we're not locked into exclusively Goodwin courses, that we can shop around essentially for the best educational and maybe the best value, which I think we need to be doing.
In our last meeting, they did ask all the districts who were in the meeting who they were using. Goodwin was the number one selected, and it is being used by many different districts. So I, as well, Doug, hope that know that the state has put them as a partner that we can and was suggested to work with. There were several different ones. So I am hoping that that continues, and I will look into that.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we're good. We'll move on to number 7, teacher evaluation update. I know we had talked about this last month, and Lucy and I had spoken, and she just wanted to see if there was any meetings that happened in between last meeting and this meeting, if you guys had any update at all. So I'll hand it off to you guys.
So we did have a meeting, but there's not going to be much of an update, because the meeting, we held it on October 5th. And what we did was I first provided a quick overview of the guidelines that the state has given us. We went over the must-dos and the should-dos. And then after that, we kind of got into smaller groups, and everybody was able to, we kind of broke all, because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of non-negotiables and there's a lot of best practices. So we kind of broke those up and then put people in small groups. And what we did was we asked everybody to reflect on our current evaluation system in conjunction with the new guidelines that were presented to us. So what the 5th, what that day was really about was providing everybody with an understanding of those guidelines, and then offering some time to reflect on what we currently have in place, so that when we do start to take next steps, it's a little easier for us to know what is working well right now in our evaluation system that we want to continue moving forward or maybe building upon. And then also talk about what maybe isn't, working so well, and how we can start tweaking those things. We also did talk about our our platform, which we currently use Protrax, and our contract is ending. And I think every person in that room was on board that they do not want to move forward with Protrax next year. So we will also be talking about, what kind of a platform we might want to use moving forward, and kind of building that up as well. I believe I finally have a co-chair after sending out a lot of emails and begging people to join me, but somebody has graciously stepped up. So I'm going to be meeting with that individual to kind of plan what our next meeting is going to really look like. But our next meeting is going to be held on November 7th during our professional learning day. The group agreed that having it during that day, giving an hour of our time for the meeting would be very beneficial, because then people that can't really make it to meetings that are after school hours can be there with us. So the plan for the next meeting, and again, this is my thoughts, but I need to talk to the co-chair because it's something that we have to communicate together, but is to really now start planning out what we have to do in terms of making necessary changes to start building in some of those guidelines into either what we currently have, or looking at some models, which I know that they're coming, but I just don't know when they're coming. I wish they were going to be here tomorrow, but you're told one thing and then you might be waiting until next year for them. So it was a very good meeting with a lot of collaboration. And I think everybody seems to be on the same board in terms of what they want to do moving forward. So I think people are excited for this change, and it's going to feel a lot more meaningful and a lot less of a box checking. We have to do this because this is what the state tells us we have to do. So it was a very good meeting, though. Next one, couple weeks.
I know Bob had brought it up last meeting, and it was something when I was looking through the minutes that we were going to approve. I took some weight to it, and then you wonder, if you'd gotten any feedback on whether students have been a part of any of the evaluations, or if they're going to be, or if it's something that could happen. I just think that Bob made up a really good point that it's a huge part of what we should see from kids, and and how they evaluate, or feedback for their own teachers. And so keep that in the back of your head if you haven't yet.
Absolutely.
Lindsay, to that, I would say there's a lot of validity in that. And I think the tricky negotiation here is that it is a negotiation. Like even this co-chair, that's like not something that Stephanie just wanted. That's a state mandate. And it really gives the teachers, I think through the legislation, a much more active role in the design of this. And so we're not afraid of that. We're going to collaborate with them, but it's a little different than most of the things we do in this space, where typically we're saying, hey, we're the district, so we're going to tell you. I mean, most people that are employed don't have that level of input in how they're evaluated. And again, I think teachers are capable of doing that. So the key will be, can we convince them that allowing that voice from the people who probably have a better idea of how effective the teaching is or isn't into this process, they might surprise us. They might be okay with that. But I think that may have been some of our skepticism when it was brought up by Bob the last time, is that, I mean, I don't know. My own experience with it is teaching graduate school. And I feel like that's the best source of information I get. Forget like the supervising professor that looks at it, has a chat with me about, this is how your students rated you. But, and especially if they take it seriously. Now, some graduate students don't fill it out, and so then you don't get anything, or they don't take it seriously. But I think, and so that would be the key too, how do we make the kids take it seriously and not make them feel like they're punishing their teacher, giving them too much power. But I think we'll definitely bring it up. I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I can see how it'd be tough just because you're getting so much that data-wise it would be hard to construe why certain things were said, and whether it's personality versus actually content or everything. But it does seem like even as part of the evaluation, it could just be an overview, like a majority of the comments that are coming in. If that's something that is an overwhelming voice, then that there is validity to it if it's an overwhelming voice, you know, and
I
it'd be
got,
nice to
I
look
got
into it.
rated. I was teaching at the university. I got rated every year or every semester actually. And a lot of times it was very helpful in the next semester for me to adjust to, some of the stuff is like, I didn't turn around enough. Some of the stuff I didn't throw chalk at the kids that were talking, but a lot of it was helpful in terms of style, mostly because the subject matter was going to be the same in an engineering course, but it helped in terms of style. But I think in a high school, I think you would get pretty good results, especially if you had a form that limited, discussion of, didn't like your coat and, and stuff like that. But
Does anybody else have any questions or anything about PDAC? Okay. You're on mute, Lindsay. It's okay.
It helps to talk to myself. No, I appreciate you guys giving us an update. I know and again, it was another one. I looked at the minutes and you guys were meeting, so I thought maybe you'd have something. So you did. So I appreciate it. And we'll just keep plugging along, and maybe touch base if you have a little bit more either.
Oh, I'm sure we'll
next
have
meeting.
more at the next meeting. Yes.
That'd be great. Okay, number 8, EL education literacy update.
So we have had a lot going on since the last time we met. I said before, and I'm going to say it again because it still stands and it's still early. Our teachers are doing the best they can, given the fact that it is very difficult to, implement any kind of new program, especially given the lack of time. So we do have a professional development day coming up on the 7th, as I said earlier, and we have given teachers, specifically at the K through 5 level, the option to work either independently or collaboratively throughout the day. We essentially gave them the full day to structure how they wanted to do it. We built in some time for collaboration for them to work together with their grade level colleagues. And I think a lot of them are taking advantage of that. Almost as far as what I've seen so far, everybody is taking advantage of that to kind of work together and collaborate more. So we are giving them the time when we have it and when we're able to give it to them. On October 13th, the coaches, I believe I mentioned this last time that we were going to be starting a cohort with a couple of other districts. So the coaches and I, along with 2 other districts, met on October 13th. For the first time, and we had a really good conversation. One thing I will say is everything that was a challenge to the other 2 districts was also a challenge for us. We are not unique in what we are seeing, what we are facing. And I think, what we're experiencing right now are just those growing pains of, again, going through a brand new program. It's a learning curve for everybody. And so what was really great about that conversation, that meeting, we met for about 2 hours, is, we started talking about things like, how do you keep track of the standards and what's being covered? And another district came out and said, well, we created this. And so they shared it. We have a Google shared drive now going where we're kind of adding some of those tools and resources that, other districts have been using and have been finding beneficial. And then we talked a little bit more about more networking options and what else we can do to kind of grow our group, which we have. We started at 3, and now I believe our next meeting next month, we have about 9 or 10 joining us. So we're going to keep expanding and keep growing. But I think that first initial meeting that we had, it was... to me, I think it's going to be a very good partnership, and it's going to be a very good way to continue to get professional learning from one another. I was able to go into a couple of classrooms to see a couple of the EL lessons, and I will say the level of engagement and collaboration amongst the kids, and especially at how young they were, it's amazing. I went into a 1st grade classroom a couple of days ago where They were in the process of building their most magnificent thing. And some of these things were very magnificent. They actually wanted a classroom pet, which the teacher said, I don't think we can have a bunny. That's what they wanted. And so they're building a bunny cage. But the way that they're doing it is so unique, and they're being really resourceful, because they talked a lot about how we don't have metal. And so they looked around the classroom. Their unit is on tools. It's tools, and I can't remember what the other piece of it is, but they were looking around the classroom and trying to figure out what else can we use to do this, because we don't have these resources available for us. And again, the collaboration, the classroom teacher explained to me that at the beginning of the process, there was a lot of, friends that were very upset because they wanted to do their own thing and they didn't want to do what that person was doing, but she really wanted to try to get them to collaborate. And she said, just to see how they got from there to where they were at when I was there, when they were really collaborating and working together, it was a great thing to see. And then it ended with, they were talking about the habits of character, because part of the EL curriculum is that it embeds these habits of character into every module. And so the teacher was asking the learners, what habits of character did we have to use today in our lesson? And the kids said, we used collaboration, we used perseverance, and we used initiative. And then she challenged the first graders, she challenged them to pick one of those habits of character and to explain how they used that habit of character in that activity with their peers. And what I was really amazed about, and I say this because I taught 8th grade, and even though I was a math teacher, I read a lot of their stuff, proofreading. They would come up to me and ask me. The level of detail that these kids had in their writing, a lot of them, not just a small group of them, but a lot of them. I mean, the ones that were doing the bunny project, they had a small bunny, and then they had a medium one, and they had a big one. And they were not only using those words, but they were really using words to explain what their bunny looked like, so that if you never saw it, it really did paint a picture for what they actually did. And, the sentences that they were writing, you think of 1st grade and, they might get a sentence or two in there. But a lot of the kids that I was able to kind of interact with, they had a couple of different sentences. And then when they got together to talk about it with each other out loud, they even spoke more about what they had, than written down on their paper. So it was really great to see. And again, we are going to continue to support our teachers in the best way that we can. We understand that time is a massive challenge right now. And we are doing everything that we can to get them that time. But I will say that, I am very hopeful in how this is going to kind of evolve over time, just by seeing what I saw in the past couple of weeks.
Thanks, Stephanie. A question I had on it is, is the prep work more because this is a new program, or is it more because it's this program?
It's because it's a new program. Now, I will say this program there is a lot of reading involved on the teacher's end right now to be able to really understand the unit overview and where it's taking them. But that's not really unique to other programs that you would bring in and implement, because you have to learn the program, to the full. You have the standards, and they're familiar with the standards, and they know the standards, but now it's just a way of how this specific program is bringing all of those together to make it one comprehensive program. And the other thing is too, with all of these materials, which we have been purchasing the materials for the teachers for the lessons, but what the coaches and the teachers, but the coaches I think are doing this a lot more just because they have the ability to do it. They're starting to build kits for the teachers so that next year, or even in future modules, they're actually starting it for future modules. It's easier for the teachers to just grab those things, and that's one less thing that they have to kind of prep and get ready for that module that they're doing. But I will say my experience with implementing any program, it always is a lot more time, just because you are really spending all of it reading, and you're not only trying to learn it from a teacher's perspective, but you're also trying to put yourself in the place of your student sitting in front of you, and you're trying to understand, if I'm doing this and we're doing this together, does this make sense for them, or do I have to do something a little different because of just who they are as, a group of kids that I'm familiar with. So I don't think it's anything unique to implementing any kind of new program.
No, that's what I really had
Anything-
wondered when I was going through, just hearing how the teachers were interacting with the program and how the kids were doing. And I struggle with that, because I was like, it seems like there's so much work for them right now, and they're really, many grade levels seem to be struggling with that prep, and how much it's taking outside of school in order to get that done. So it would be great, and you guys might already be doing it, but as much support as we can give to them inside and outside to be able to get through this, if this is something that's a growing pain with the program, is just incredibly important at this point.
Absolutely. Yep.
My experience has been any digital platform, especially if you weren't, so technology adept all the time, you get better at it. You just, it eventually becomes simpler, and you do it. It's about routine and, just learning what the buttons mean and so on. But I'm sure it's more than what we realize, but it's not going away. That's for sure. So it's the new world.
If I could add too, and I've had the advantage of been doing some small group meetings with grade levels and things like that, and you might imagine this is top of mind for a lot of them, along with the reconfiguration for next year. And I'm pleased to hear, first of all, I'm validating everything that Stephanie said and that Lindsay said. It's a lot of work. I think anyone who isn't putting the work in probably isn't implementing the program the way that we've asked them to. But I've been encouraged in hearing that, maybe not to every person, but the vast majority say it's a great program. It's just, it's a lot. It's going to take years to implement and get good at. And the way that a few of them described it to me that I think might be helpful in even thinking through it is that, they know their content and they know how to teach. I mean, we have a very good group of teachers, but because it's so new, they don't feel any freedom to take liberties with kind of what's scripted and written the first time through, and everything is the first time through for them in this cycle. And so that's why it's taking more time, and they recognize that won't always be the case. And even in terms of like selection of resources and things like that, they're not, because they haven't done it, they're kind of just taking what's been handed to them. Eventually they'll apply their own expertise and knowledge and be able to shape that in a better way. The other thing that may happen structurally, if we choose to think of it this way, is, like we put this program in, but we haven't changed anything else. So the majority of these teachers are also teaching all the math, all the history, they're teaching all the science, and all of these things. And I'm not saying we're suggesting that we change that model fundamentally, but some of the teachers at least have said to me, could we consider, like we're all getting trained in this, could we consider some more sharing between multiple classrooms of learners and things like that? And I think we really need to consider that, especially because they are asking for that. Again, none of that will provide them any immediate relief to what we're talking about, but at least if they have the hope that perhaps in the out years, it could be structured slightly differently. And I think there could be some great educational value to doing that as well. So I just wanted you guys to be aware that I'd heard that, and that we don't want to just kind of blow that input off. We want to really think about some of that. And some of our principals have said that input has come independently from some of these K-5 teachers who are implementing and already seeing there might be better ways to group and teach around this. And I think that's very exciting, because again, if we tell them they have to do it a different way, we're not going to get the buy-in. But if they're asking for it, I think there's an opportunity here to really do that.
That's definitely some good feedback. Does anyone have any questions about EL or the update on EL? Bob? Nope. Jamie, you're good? Okay, we'll move on then. So we'll maybe even Lucy and Jamie, if you guys want to talk, if you want to keep this as like a standard update, or if maybe you want to come every other meeting, and maybe we'll have more every other meeting, and might be a good idea on that end. So we will move on to number 9. We're getting there, guys. SBAC ELA Math Improvement Plan. So I had put this on to the agenda after talking to, oh, hold on one second. Sorry, something glitchy with my internet there. We had asked to put this one on just if we are going back and looking at the SBAC and the ELA and just wanting some more measures and more data on where we want to go improvement wise. And I can send it to both Stephanie and Liza and even Doug. It's something you might already even have, but we're going back to the Next Generation Accountability Report from 2019. Towards the end of it, there was, a good level of slides about multi-tiered system support and where we feel like we've had successes and where we feel like we need work, and some targets for different growth achievement that I'd like to see. So it's not something even that we need to discuss today. And Doug and I had talked about it too, that we just want to give you guys a heads up just in the meeting that, we're going to be looking for a little bit more data on that for next meeting and give you guys a real chance to really look through what was there back in 19 and see how that really ties in with student-centered and with what we currently have in the district, and taking into account COVID. But I can send it if it'll help. And then I can send it to the committee if there's anything on those reports or spreadsheets, slides that you guys would want to look at. We can pull those out too. Does that sound similar to what we had talked about, Doug?
Yes, it does. And I am also hoping, not promising, but hoping that, sooner versus later, we can show some things through the action plans that we want to develop that specifically target math and ELA. That's something that some board members have asked about. Should in theory improve these test scores. That wouldn't be the only reason we would do them. But I think it goes back a little bit to my previous comment. And again, I think you guys know I don't micromanage a superintendent. I don't just say everyone has to do this way. We need to get buy-in from the other administrators and also from the teachers. But I think it's important for us not to believe that we could just keep doing things the exact same way, especially with how much time we're allotting to math and ELA at all levels, but and also the way that we're grouping kids and the way that we're doing all this. So I don't see one being exclusive of the other. And even going back to some of the stuff Tara was talking about, if some of that work can take off more, I think there's an opportunity here. And the other thing I will tell you is I was pleasantly surprised, even from this time last year to this year, there seemed to be more teachers who are more energized about thinking about doing things a different way. I think when I first got here, we were coming out of a pandemic. There was a lot of fear. People were worried we were just going to that doing some of this work was going to mean getting rid of everything we're currently doing. And I think they get now we're not doing that. But yet they're saying we could do X, Y, and Z, but not if everything stays exactly the same structurally. And so, again, I can't promise what we're going to be, but I don't think it's acceptable to just think we'll keep doing things the same way and expect better results. And I don't know if Stephanie or Liza, if you want to say anything to that. I'm kind of editorializing here, but you guys have heard me say it to you. And I think the principals know that that's how I feel as well.
Yeah, and I will say, to go along with what Doug was saying about teachers feeling more empowered and more ready to kind of make shifts in their own teaching approaches, we're seeing it too. I mean, people are reaching out, asking for professional learning opportunities on so many different things that they really want to try to start doing in their classroom, just to make changes. And I think that a lot of the conversations I've had with teachers is that they do recognize that, the way that they used to do things is just not working anymore with the group of students that are sitting in front of them. And so we have a lot more teachers that are really eager to, bring some of these new instructional approaches into their classroom. And they're really going out of their way to say, hey, can you find these materials for me? I want to learn more about this. Can you connect me with somebody else? A lot of people are still making connections with individuals that ran sessions in August to kind of, grow their understanding of these things that they want to bring in. But I definitely see that too, that teachers are really eager to make these shifts in their classrooms, and we're excited because that's what we want. We don't ever want to force anything on anybody. We want them to be empowered to want to do it for themselves and for their learners. And that's what we're seeing more and more. So it's a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Tara
and-
talked earlier about
Yeah.
she talked earlier about engagement, and that's a huge thing. But another thing is also the relationships and the connections. And without that in the classroom between, students, learners, and teacher and adults in the building and everything, we are not going to improve either. And so I think that's an area also that we are striving to work on, that will, it is not directly math and ELA, but it is so very, very important.
Yeah, and I know our time is short, but I just, and I think everyone on this call knows this, but I think it's just important for me to say, right now, I've been very cognizant, especially doing these small group meetings with teachers at all levels. I kind of have a different approach with our K-5 folks right now, because I feel like the combination of the grade level configuration for next year and the EL program, no matter how we package it, anything else we send their way as like an expectation, we may just push them over the edge. They're pretty stressed right now about both of these things, and our job is to help get them through and support them through kind of both of those things. And I'm not saying that means we're ignoring the other subjects at elementary. We're not, or that we're only focusing on secondary. But I think it's safe to say you're going to see more in the next couple of years, innovative practices coming at the secondary level than at the elementary, just because these two things are going to be such a heavy lift for those folks. And yet we'll still have the ability to support those that want to do it through people like Tara. But this kind of across the board stuff, it's just, I think you guys all know that. And I just think it's important for me to share that, because that's what I'm hearing from them, not complaining, just saying, hey, we have a lot on our plates right now, and we want you guys to know that. And I've heard them, and I validated that. And I know you guys probably have too, when you've heard from them. So I just think that was important to say.
One of the things that concerns me is that since we're going to continue to use these exams, SBAC, and other things, we need to figure out how we're going to actually measure what's going on, and how we're going to, if we're going to have a plan, what are the outcomes, what are the goals, how do we set a goal? In the past, we just said we want to be 75% or 90% of the DERG. We want to be at that level. We just picked that out of the sky, but we were actually making progress towards that during that time period. So, I think one of the things that you should be thinking about is, how do we actually measure improvement in our delivery or in our results? What's a good way to do it, other than if you're just going to say the scores or the growth things aren't really indicative or aren't really successful. What is a good way for us to determine whether or not we're having improvements, and in both math and ELA or science? What do we want that to look like? It could be how many kids are taking science. It could be how many kids are taking advanced math. Maybe some of those measurements that are not specifically grade level, scored level, show us some level of improvement. But I think there's got to be some way you can deliver back to us and maybe the general public that there is growth, there is achievement, and we're moving farther along than we were. I mean, it's so prevalent in the news that there's been this delay in math and English from COVID. And how are we moving through this process, and how are we telling people we're getting through it? And I don't think it necessarily has to be just scores. It needs to be, process and programs that might show us that we're getting there.
Yeah, I think part of that, and I just sent it out, but Bob, you can take a look at it, but it does, that accountability is in a lot of that 2019 accountability report. And I think if we can pull some of the measures there, as well as some of the updated stuff for the other ways we're going to evaluate besides just test scores, I think we should be able to come up with, a good plan in the aspects you were just talking about. So I think we're getting there.
I would hope that, for any apprehension that arises about combining things, when you get grade level teachers, perhaps give them the opportunity to just gather to me, those are the most valuable PDs, where we just collaborate and what works for you. And I always found that very comforting. And I did it today, and that was the best part of the PD, just talking to some of my colleagues, and you vent a little bit, you do, but it's a necessary human reaction.
I agree. All right. Anything else on this agenda item? If not, I know we're all psyched. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Bob? All right. Second, Jamie. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. We will adjourn at 5:57. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.